So thank you all for coming. We're going to start out tonight with Ramzi Kassem, who teaches at CUNY Law School and is also the director of a law clinic where students have the experience of representing and working on the cases of Guantanamo prisoners, but also prisoners, as I said, who were held in the black sites and in Bagram and in other ways have been under the thumb of the United States domestically or internationally. He's worked on the situation of the repression against Muslim students and Muslims in communities around the country. And he is always traveling back and forth. He represents Shaker Aamer along with other attorneys. So I'll pass the mic to Ramzi Kassem, and please welcome him.
Thank you. Well, let me begin by thanking Rutgers Church, the pastor of Rutgers Church, the community here for welcoming us into their space for this conversation. Of course, also I'd like to thank the organizers, Deborah, all the other organizations that have come together and make this evening possible. As Deborah mentioned, with my students at CUNY, I represent Shaker Aamer and a number of other prisoners at Guantanamo and elsewhere. So let me tell you a little bit about Shaker. Shaker Aamer is the only remaining British resident who is imprisoned at Guantanamo Bay today. He has a spouse and 4 children living in London. They're all UK nationals. He himself is of Saudi origin, and he originally left the United Kingdom with his family to resettle in Afghanistan in the hope of finding a more observant Islamic community where he could live and where his wife, for example, could walk around the street in veil and not be subject to harassment the way she had been in the United Kingdom. So for that reason and a number of others, he and his spouse made the difficult decision to relocate to Afghanistan. And with 9/11, not unlike literally hundreds, if not thousands of others, he was rounded up and sold for a bounty to the US military. He was imprisoned in Afghanistan at first, where he survived horrendous abuse at the hands of his US captors, but with the complicity and presence and participation of agents of the United Kingdom, and that's going to be important for reasons that I'll return to. And then he was a victim of extraordinary rendition, brought to Guantanamo against his will. Shaker today, continues. And I think it's been sort of a philosophy or a discipline for him in his years at Guantanamo to, mount as much peaceful resistance, mount as much civil disobedience as he can engage in. It's a way for him, and these are the words that he's chosen to express it. It's a way for him to not only preserve his humanity, but to remind his captors of their humanity. And so hunger striking, sit-ins, refusals to return to his cell, all of those forms of passive peaceful disobedience are ones that he's engaged in and that he continues to engage in. As a result, he spent a large part of his years in captivity at Guantanamo in solitary confinement. We all know, we've heard from experts how devastating even a week of solitary confinement can be for any human being. So picture what the effect must have been on Shaker and the others like him at Guantanamo and in prisons in the United States who are often left in solitary confinement for years. So that's Shaker's story. One thing I want to highlight, and again, I don't want to go on for too long because there are probably varying levels of knowledge in the room, and I want to make sure that we're actually having a conversation where we're addressing people's questions rather than going over stuff that you might already know. But one thing to keep in mind about Shaker's case is that you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take Andy's word for it. A lot of people in the media will say, well, these men at Guantanamo are dangerous. They're a threat to society. Should we really release them? The fact to remember about Shaker is obviously, he's never been charged with any crime like almost everyone else at Guantanamo. So therefore, he should be presumed innocent. But an additional fact to remember is that in 2007, under the Bush administration, a military review panel, cleared him for release. That's a U.S. military review panel that back in 2007, 7 years ago, almost 8 years ago now, said this man should go home to the United Kingdom. Then again in 2009, after President Obama took over, he pulled together an interagency task force, and that task force reviewed the files of all of the Guantanamo prisoners, and they again found that Shakur should be released and repatriated to the United Kingdom. So again, you don't have to take my word for it. You have the US military saying that he should be released under the Bush administration, and then you have every single agency in the US government that has a say in national security matters saying the same thing in 2009. So that's the CIA, the FBI, again the Department of Defense, Department of State, Department of Justice, all signing off on this man's release, and as Deborah pointed out, on the release of, at this point, the majority of the men left at Guantanamo. So despite the fact that he's been twice cleared, Shakur remains at Guantanamo today in 2015. So the big question is, why is that the case? Why should this man remain at Guantanamo even though he's been twice cleared by 2 different US presidential administrations, even though in the United Kingdom you've had successive prime ministers and successive foreign ministers publicly calling for his repatriation to the United Kingdom, stating that the official policy of the United Kingdom is that Shakur Aamer should be reunited with his family. And this isn't any old country. You're talking about the United Kingdom, which is the United States' single oldest, most important ally. So, you know, of course we can speculate why Shakur remains at Guantanamo today. My guess is that, you know, to some extent, there are parties in the United Kingdom, in the intelligence services in the United Kingdom, who have been sabotaging or obstructing his repatriation there because they don't want him to be in a place where he can speak even more freely about the role that those UK intelligence agencies had in his torture and the torture of other men in Afghanistan and other US prisons worldwide. So that may be one reason, and perhaps there are similar elements within the US government here in the Department of Defense who also don't want to see him return to a place like the United Kingdom where, you know, he could speak more freely about the torture that he's survived and who is involved in the commission of those crimes. Be that, you know, whatever the fact, whatever the reality is, one thing that we can all do today, especially as, you know, we're coming up on an important visit by UK Prime Minister David Cameron to Washington, where he's going to have, you know, meetings at the White House with President Obama. The dates of the visit have not been set yet, but we expect that it's going to happen at some point in January or early February. So this is a key moment for, you know, all of us who are here in the United States to, you know, reach out and, you know, send those emails to President Obama and say, you know, this should be a prominent agenda item. You're going to meet with the UK Prime Minister. Why is this man still at Guantanamo today? We're mounting a similar effort in the United Kingdom, and Andy will be able to say more about that perhaps, where we're also trying to build pressure on David Cameron to make sure that, you know, Shakur is at the top of the agenda when it comes to those discussions bilaterally between Obama and the UK Prime Minister. And, you know, we're hopeful that with this renewed momentum of releasing people from Guantanamo, that Shakur can finally, you know, be home with his family. But again, this is a key moment, and hopefully, you know, we can all work together to take advantage of it with Shakur. Thank you.
Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Y antes de morir me quiero echar mis besos del alma. Todos. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. Mi verso es un verde claro y de un carmín encendido. Mi verso es de un verde claro y de un carmín encendido. Mi verso es un ciervo herido que busca en el monte amparo. Everybody. Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera. Cultivo una rosa blanca en julio como en enero. Cultivo una rosa blanca en julio como en enero, para el amigo sincero que me da su mano franca. Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera. Con los pobres de la tierra, all the poor, quiero yo mi suerte echar. I throw myself to you. Con los pobres de la tierra, quiero yo mi suerte echar. El arroyo de la sierra me complace más que el mar. Todo. Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera.